Let me start by introducing and asking Doug Colbert to come up. Doug is a professor with the University of Maryland School of Law. He's director of Access to Justice Clinic. He's a bail reform advocate for over the past 20 years. He and Catalina Bird, for example, are experts on this. And in our 21st century age, when you can be experts and be on the same interview program with someone, but never have met in person. So our campaign is delighted to have the chance to actually do that as well. I'll turn it over to Doug.
Well, thank you, and thank you all for coming, and it's really an honor for me to be part of this wonderful campaign, as important as any campaign that we've had for state senator. I teach at Maryland Law School, and for the past 20 years, my students and I and lawyers have been really trying to bring more justice to people who don't have the financial resources to purchase a lawyer, to be able to buy their freedom before trial. And the reason I'm voting for Sheldon, frankly, Sheldon, is because you are a person of integrity. You are a person of honesty. You're somebody that we never have to question your votes coming because somebody has paid you money or lobbyists have sought your bidding. It'll come because you believe in equal justice. And that's been his whole career, really. Distinguished career as an assistant attorney general who really tries to be a people's lawyer. And that's what we need right now. We need people in Annapolis who are going to do the job for all the people in our district, all the people in our state, not only those who have the finances to be able to buy what they're entitled to, which is equal justice. And for me, I think what's most important is that Sheldon understands the role of government. And we need government, particularly to provide for those basic human rights. In my mind, Sheldon, you're a human rights lawyer and an advocate. And so, and I guess in a sense, really bringing democracy with a small d to everyone who lives in our town. And bringing progressive values with the big D for the Democratic Party. And I say that because Sheldon's opponent is much more comfortable, in my opinion, with spending time with the Republicans who usually will vote with him on so many different elections or votes that take place in the Judiciary Committee. If you look at the vote, it's almost always the 6 Republicans and Bobby Zirkin, and the dissenting folks are the 4 Democrats on that committee. I've been following Bobby since he joined the House of Delegates in 1999, and frankly, I had really big hopes for him because he was a Georgetown Law School graduate. Georgetown's a wonderful school. I figured my role as a law professor, perhaps Bobby would become one of our zealous advocates for justice. But instead, at the very first conversation, Bobby shared with me something that he probably didn't mean to in retrospect. But he told me, Professor, I just want to let you know that one of my best and closest friends is the head of the Lexington bail bonds, which is the biggest bail bonds in the state and, frankly, in the country. And it turns out that Bobby was best man at the president of Lexington Bonds, and since then has really done everything. What they say in Annapolis is been carrying the water bucket for the bail bondsman ever since, and has been doing a very effective job of it, I might add. Other people are going to be speaking about other issues in which Bobby has shown a preference for money interests as opposed to just doing what's right for all the people. Shown an interest for landlords rather than tenants, for managers and owners rather than for minimal wage for working people. But my experience with him, frankly, has led me to see, and I want to share with you 1 or 2 things in the few minutes that I have. And the biggest thing really is that in the very beginning, we fought very hard for poor people to have a lawyer when their liberty's at stake. You might think that everybody has a right to a lawyer, but they don't. They have a right to a lawyer at trial, and sometimes just before trial. But when our freedom is at stake, which in my view is our most fundamental human right, liberty, and when people appear before a judge or a commissioner and they're asking to be released, as they should be in most situations, except for the people who represent a danger to others or a flight risk, but they're asking for their release, but they don't have an advocate to fight for their freedom. And without a lawyer, you're 5 times as likely to wind up getting a bail. And because most people arrested, 92% of the people arrested are charged with nonviolent crimes. But they need a lawyer to avoid paying a bail bondsman that 10% non-refundable fee. And it's a very lucrative industry that we're talking about. Well, it took us probably about 15 years, but in 2013, the Maryland Court of Appeals declared that poor people have a constitutional right to a lawyer at their first bail hearing. Now, that was a huge decision, and as I said, we fought that for 7.5 years in court. So what does Senator Zirkin do? He proposes a bill that would take away the constitutional right to a lawyer and put it to a vote to decide whether the taxpayers would like to pay for the public defender to represent someone. Could you imagine if you put a referendum in front of people on each and every one of our constitutional rights and the lobbying that would take place among the religious right on some of the very powerful people that might not want all of the different rights that we have? So Bobby represented the bondsman for that. And he didn't win because, fortunately, Senator Brian Frosch was the leader of making sure that there was equal justice for poor people. But he fought like heck for that bill. And every time the bondsmen are in danger, Bobby comes to their rescue. And the other parts of this, and people hear me speak about it too, is, frankly, the Bobby Zirkin that presents himself in this community, in our community, is very different than the Bobby Zirkin that's presented in Annapolis. He's very nice to his friends, allows them to speak and testify for as long as they choose to do so. But for people who oppose his position, he will use that 2-minute rule to cut us off. And he is very dedicated to basically telling us when 2 minutes are up. But for other folks, they're allowed to speak, in some cases, I don't need to mention names, but for 45 minutes, an hour, whatever it might be. There's a basic unfairness here. In Annapolis, I've seen Senator Zirkin call people who weren't even scheduled to testify. He called a friend of mine, Mark Schindler, who's an attorney in Washington, D.C. Mark had written an op-ed article the year before that apparently Senator Zirkin didn't care for. And he literally called him up and then spent the next 20, 25 minutes grilling him, saying that he had demeaned other senators and the Senate Judiciary Committee. So what I'm looking for here is that you will look and take somebody who is not just a decent human being, but someone who's going to stand up and lead, someone who's going to not just do what the leadership wants them to do, but is going to do what's right and what's fair. And that's Sheldon in a word. I mean, if there's anything that I know about him, it's that he's dedicated to justice. And we need people like that more now than probably any other time in my lifetime. These are perilous times for our Constitution. They're perilous times for people's fundamental rights in a justice system and outside of it. So I ask you and I urge you to cast your vote as I will cast mine for Sheldon Laskin. Thank you so much.